on multiple social media outlets, do you? Like you don't use HubSpot or something like
Here
that?
we go. It's on live.
Are you telling me that you have a way to defer the tax situation there? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so the first one I was referring to is a 1031 exchange, which only applies to investment real estate. The second one I'm referring to is called a deferred sales trust.
A real eye opener to see that there are ways that people can use the regulatory framework, if properly structured, to invest 1031 exchange dollars in things that you would not think were like kind to what they exited from. So it was very impressive. I got to say, you are the first one I've seen pull this off, and I'm pretty hesitant to believe in a lot of these kinds of things. So it's a major feat for me to say, wow, this actually really worked, and it was really cool.
1031 is a way to shelter your income when you sell the thing. The DST is a way to avoid the 1031 and not have to suffer the time penalty.
Our career and during different tax periods, we've seen, these tax avoidance, tax minimization, offshore, all these different strategies undertaken to minimize or avoid taxes. And then I can tell you that, some of them are just not worth the trouble. And so I was skeptical. Admittedly, I was skeptical. I thought, oh yeah, here we go, another one of these, right? And then they say, no, it really is different, right? So look more closely. We looked more closely. We had, honestly, 2 years of conversations. 2 years. Now we were being due diligence at the same time that we were doing due diligence, but 2 years is a long time to be, sort of flirting with the idea of and getting to know the people and getting to really understand the transaction. Yeah, long story short, we got comfortable, although we are not tax attorneys, lawyers, or estate planning attorneys, that at least, from an investment perspective, that, it made sense to sell a highly appreciated asset, get liquid, hold that in this type of a deferred or installment sale type of instrument, and then just be in a position then to do the most important thing. I'm probably stealing your next question, which is time. They say, well, you can't make more time. You can. The deferred sales trust, in a way, allows you to lengthen the investment time horizon for those assets after getting liquid, but before having to feel the tax impact. And from an investment manager's perspective, time horizon is the most important element in investment.
Everybody, hey, welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions Deferred Sales Trust Mastermind and/or Deferred Sales Trust Made Simple, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help when they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options and not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is an amazing way for you to exit highly appreciated assets, all tax deferred, to defer hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars of tax so you can create and preserve more wealth or help others do the same. For those who don't know me, my name is Brett Swartz, and I'm the founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions. I'm a Deferred Sales Trust trustee. I'm also a multifamily broker and investor, and I just love helping and working with business professionals as well as high net worth individuals to map out an exit plan when they go to sell their real estate. And our kind of our series here, what we're going, we typically talk about the vision of the Deferred Sales Trust. We also talk about the Deferred Sales Trust kind of deal close story of the week and or the live escrow deal and what challenges we're working through. That part of that is just kind of documenting the journey of everything Deferred Sales Trust so that we could speed up your education for this and application, because it's one thing to have knowledge and inspiration, but it's another thing to actually apply it and be able to use certain strategies like the 1031 exchanges or opportunity zones or dollar cost averaging or diversification or estate tax, elimination. So these are the things that we're trying to work through on live deals and then give you a chance as the audience or the participant, as the business professional, to ask about your live deal and or just questions of us along the way. That being said, I am joined by two of my strategic alliances / business partners, Jake Miller and Pierce York. Pierce, how are we doing today?
Doing phenomenal. How are you?
Doing well. Looks like you are driving somewhere, which is cool. Hopefully to go help somebody. But Pierce is out of Newport Beach. He's a luxury real estate agent. He's on my real estate team, and he helps also co-host the podcast these days. And so, Pierce, anything exciting this week?
Got a commercial building for sale that we're listed for 11.2 million with, and the owner has a significant gain on that if we get anywhere near that 11 million, $10 million number. So it was educating him on the DST, and we pull this off. He's looking to save roughly $2.5 to $3 million in tax. He can go ahead and reinvest in other assets at a time that's going to be, phenomenal. So it's, that's exciting.
Excellent. Thanks, Pierce. And Jake Miller, financial extraordinaire, business partners to help our clients who are using the Deferred Sales Trust. Jake, how are we doing?
Doing very well. Happy to be here and excited about today's discussion.
Absolutely. Can you give us a little bit more about the vision, Jake, and then we can get started on the deal close story of the week?
Absolutely. We are all here today because somebody we know or ourselves, there might be a highly appreciated asset and a capital gains tax scenario that we'd like to either mitigate or defer. And we're able to do that with the Deferred Sales Trust. So should you be selling a highly appreciated asset and the amount is greater than $1 million net proceeds that would otherwise be taxable as capital gains, and the tax paying is sufficient enough that you'd rather reinvest those dollars through this business trust rather than pay the government entities today, then the Deferred Sales Trust might be appropriate for you.
Absolutely. That's a great vision. And by the way, who does it work for? It works for anybody that has, NFTs or cryptocurrency or a business sale. Just I helped a veterinarian out in Connecticut, and then just helped a dentist out in New Jersey. And it works for investment real estate, like land sales. We just helped a $15 million Texas land sale deal. Works for primary homes. Did one in Palo Alto for our luxury primary home. Works for multifamily properties. Did one in Denver. Works for car wash businesses. Just one in San Diego for $13 million. So really anything you could think of that's highly appreciated, it works for. Works for public stock, private stock. Now Jake and I are working on a live deal, which will transition now to the kind of the live deal of the week, and then we'll talk about a closed deal here of the week. But this live deal is really interesting. I never thought about this, but do you guys know that the original kind of foundations of crypto are actually based upon websites or domains? In other words, domains was the first time, like for example, let's imagine you had Amazon.com or Cars.com or Homes.com, and you had that 20 years ago when, 30 years ago, whenever you had the chance to buy websites, that was the first opportunity that you had a chance to sort of bet on the future of something, right? It was in the digital world, and that was, worldwide. And it's sort of what the foundation of what currency is for cryptocurrency, digital currency. And I had a chance to interview an amazing gentleman that Jake and I are going to be working with. And this gentleman basically brokers and buys domains, and he is considering selling a domain. And so, Jake, talk a little bit about that and just how kind of incredible to think about that people have been buying and selling domains for years. Some of them they buy at $200 or $500 or $1,000, and then they're worth a $5 million gain, let's say. That's a huge tax, and there's no 1031 exchange option for those types of things. In fact, would you clarify what the 1031 exchange actually works for, Jake?
Absolutely. So first, a 1031 is for real estate, and there are all of these like-kind rules in order for it to be an eligible rollover. For example, should a dentist in Florida have a dental office and want to move to Utah, this 1031 is kind of built, this tax loophole is built for this type of scenario, to where without getting burdened with unnecessary taxes by selling a piece of real estate that the dentist has been using in Florida, he can roll over the gains and the proceeds and the debt and everything else into a like-kind property, a new office space here in Utah, so that he can continue his business without a big tax burden for making that move. That is perhaps one of the best scenarios of when it is appropriate to use a 1031. And again, it's for real estate.
And that's it. And not even primary homes, right? And not businesses and not cryptocurrency, not domains, not artwork, not public or private stock. In fact, That's the beauty of the deferred sales trust, that it works for just about any asset type, which then begs the question, well, once it's in there, Jake, how and where can I invest these funds, and how does that help in my overall kind of diversification, liquidity in times like this?
Absolutely. And now we're talking about the deferred sales trust. Once the funds are in there, you've sold whatever you're selling, you're able to reinvest in any asset that would show up on your personal financial statement that is not used personally. So for any kind of reinvestment purpose, or an asset that could be held for resale that you do not receive personal enjoyment from. So if it's a Ferrari and you get to drive around and enjoy it, then it's probably not the right type of asset.
Perfect. And then as a certified financial planner, Jake, and helping people, make really great, smart decisions with their wealth and preserving it, talk about the importance of diversification, liquidity, and getting out of debt in a times like this.
Absolutely. So there's the two things, right? Founder of Strategic Tax Solutions. And then on the other side, I'm an IAR, an investment advisor rep of Alphi Financial, and I'm also an owner. With those two combined disciplines, it is incredibly important that people diversify their underlying assets, especially in times like today. Now, right now, if you're not in marketable securities, it might be a good time to get in there because a lot of things are at discount. Right now, if you're not in crypto, it might be a good time to get in there because everything's at discount. Now, those individuals who have been there and kind of rode things downward, they're feeling a little bit of the pain, and some of them are wishing that maybe they would have diversified earlier on and had some real estate, perhaps some multifamily, something that provides income and appreciation. Right now, with inflationary times as well, having stock, whether it's direct ownership or marketable securities, is a natural inflation hedge against what we're seeing at the gas pumps, everything else that we're seeing at the grocery store. So with our clients, we look at not only cash flow, not only rate of return, but we also look at tax flow, and we help analyze from a diversified standpoint, if you sell that big domain, should you reinvest in other domains? Should you reallocate it across other asset classes that maybe have zero correlation or a negative correlation to some of your other holdings, so that in the future, when you need liquidity, and again, that's the other thing that we look at very heavily, Brett, is duration. What point, based on the client's objectives, do they need what type of liquidity, what money? And the Deferred Sales Trust helps us accomplish all of those things because it allows us to invest more money now instead of chopping things up every time we have a transaction and giving them to the various government entities. We're allowed to say, hey, government entities, we acknowledge that we've had some gains and we'll pay you later. We're going to invest those dollars we otherwise paid you. Or in other words, we're going to invest your money because we don't have to pay it to you now. And we're going to make more and better use of it with all of our other investments, which oftentimes employ people, oftentimes help boost the economy, oftentimes help the flow, which when things are stagnant, that's when our economy suffers the most. And so all of the items that we do within a deferred sales trust, Brett, are not only good for our clients, not only good for everybody who participates with it, but it's actually by and large for the economy, the micro and the macro, it's beneficial.
Absolutely. I'm going to pull a couple things out of that, right? So tax flow versus cash flow, right? So as governments increase spending, they also have to increase taxes, right? And or just print a bunch more money, which then they have a lot of inflation, which then they have to increase taxes, and then they have to increase interest rates. It's this whole thing there, right? But I think most would agree that taxes are going to go up, right? And it's more important than ever to have a tax flow plan. So what does that mean? Well, that means to be able to exit well, especially when you have capital gains tax. What is that? Somewhere between 25 to 50% of your gain is going to be wiped out by state, federal, Obamacare, depreciation recapture, depending on the asset. And so that's so important as you exit that you're looking at your tax flow plan. And we liken it to in a Rubik's Cube. And your Rubik's Cube has on one side tax flow. Let's say that's the blue color. The yellow side could be cash flow. The other side could be your lifestyle. The other side, let's say another color could be red, could be estate tax, right? And looking at all these things and trying to line up which plan is going to help me solve my problem on the holistic tax flow and cash flow situation. And with that, it's the deferred sales trust. We found it to be the most flexible and entrepreneurial, and also for those who want to be passive or active tax strategies that's out there. By the way, you can learn more about that at capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Let's also touch on, this changing of all of the wealth, right? The largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet is taking place right now. And in fact, according to the American Bankers Association, a bunch of other studies, there's about $32 trillion of the baby boomers' wealth that's set to transfer from from their generation to the millennials in the next 15 to 20 years. And this is known as the largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet. In fact, there's 10,000 baby boomers every day turning 65, and about 77 million in the US alone. And half of their assets are tied to illiquid, not diversified, highly appreciated private businesses or private equity, commercial real estate, or primary homes. And they want to be able to move from phase one of their life. What's phase one? That's typically building the wealth and accumulating the wealth, right? Working years. And they want to be able to move towards the phase two of their life, which is typically what? Retiring, traveling, spending more time with, whatever hobbies or other things they want to do, just living off of the wealth that's been accumulated, right? And so that transition is a huge opportunity and also a huge challenge, right? Huge opportunity if you can defer and or eliminate some estate tax or defer the capital gains tax and allow that wealth to accumulate and build. Or big challenge, you don't do those planning, you don't have the strategy, you don't hire the team to help you execute this, and about 40% is going to go to the government on the death tax, anything above certain exclusion numbers. And so having your tax flow plan in place, knowing what phase you're in, is so important. That's why we love the deferred sales trust. So let's move towards some of the other things that we're working on this week. Go ahead, Jake. Want to add to that?
Before we jump on that, no, I think we've got a question here that we can help answer in phases. So I'm going to rapid fire some questions at you.
Yeah.
Really quick. When is the appropriate time that somebody should engage with us for the deferred sales trust if they have a transaction that they're not for sure they want to use the trust with, but they want to be prepared?
Yeah. What is the timing of the deferred sales trust if you want to execute it? Well, earlier the better. But to our drop dead times are the buyer has removed all contingencies and or you've already exited the property, the real estate, the crypto, and the funds are sitting in your personal account. And so there's really two categories. There's the investment real estate category, which has the 1031 option. And from there, we can save a failed 1031 exchange if you're working with a proper qualified intermediary that's strategically aligned with us. Number two would be everything else you need to set up prior to. And now we've done deals in as little as a week, a couple days, but no one wants to work under that fire drill. We like to say be early, 30, 60 days before you sell, but it's never too early for us. In fact, you can start your planning right now, even if it's a year or two or three ahead of time. In fact, we encourage you to do that. You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to learn more about that. What's the next question, Jake? Go.
Yeah. So let's say that we get the trust going and the client doesn't end up selling. They've just moved their asset into a trust, or what is the reality and how does that work?
Yeah. So, sorry, say that question one more time. I think I missed it.
Yeah. So people know that, hey, we have a buyer and a seller, and we put the trust in the middle and we transfer the asset to the trust before it goes to the buyer.
Right.
And so this individual is concerned about, hey, if I move it into the trust and the deal goes south, what happens? Am I stuck with a trustee now over my property?
Great question. Right. So we're not in the business of owning any real estate or assets, and that's our role as a third-party trustee for any period of time for maybe a half second. In fact, the way that we design these deferred sales trusts is it gives the seller an option to exercise at the close of escrow with a third-party unrelated buyer and a third-party unrelated trustee. Same thing like if you were to set up a 1031 exchange, like you're not concerned that the funds are going to go to the qualified intermediary unless the deal actually closes. And then it closes, it goes there. So in fact, we work on a conditional basis. If for any reason the deal doesn't close, the buyer doesn't close, we actually do not transact. So it's not as if you're transferring it today and we're closing in a month or a week or a day. We're doing it in a simultaneous close. And if the buyer does not perform, nobody closes, everything goes back. You owe us no money. Does that answer the question, Jake?
That does. It's very helpful. Now, I just want to reiterate part of what you said, though. So are you telling me, Brett, that I can get my trust set up, conditional basis, don't have to pay any money? We get to the day of the deal. What kind of language is in there in the contract if I just want to back out and not do the trust and I want to pay the taxes?
Yeah, great question. Basically, it's the right to exercise this trust, right? And so it's the seller has a right to use a deferred sales trust or a 1031 exchange or a charitable remainder trust at no additional cost to the buyer is the general language. And then we have specific language for individual trust if and when it actually gets to that point. And so that is the answer. In fact, you're not even going to sign the paperwork if it's not going to happen. So you're not signing or transferring anything unless the buyer basically has signed and is removing contingencies, and then you're exercising that option. So it's like an assignment of sale. By the way, people do this all the time. In fact, Jake and you and I have a deal in Texas where they bought it for I think it was $5 million, sold it for $8 million, and they actually had the deal lined up. They hadn't even bought it yet. They had the contract to buy it. They lined up a second buyer, and they assigned the interest all in simultaneous, and then they use the trust on the back end. So it's very common. It just, most people aren't used to it. But the key is there's no risk for you as the seller. If the deal and the buyer doesn't perform, you don't transfer anything to the trust.
So one last confirmation here. So Brett, you're telling me that the client has up until they sign the contract to sell the property to decide whether or not they really want to use the trust. However, they have to have it in place before.
100%. Exactly right.
Okay. And so that sounds like almost too perfect of a world. Like literally they can back out at any time. They work with us, they work with the attorney. All of this is prepared, but yet they still retain this as an option that they can exercise on the day of the sale.
Exactly right.
That they absolutely don't have to.
Right. And part of that is because we want to take the pressure off of you. We believe in so much of what we do at Capital Gains Tax Solutions and in the Deferred Sales Trust and the professionals that we work with to execute this, that we don't want to have anything that's a barrier between you and using the strategy. Our closing ratio is very high if we have time to educate and work with you and your team that's putting your deal together. And so we work on a conditional basis. You don't owe any attorney fees. You don't owe any fees to my team or to Jake or to our tax attorneys that put this together, because we're so confident that you're going to use it if the numbers make sense. That's also why we have those minimums, though, right? So we don't want to work on deals that are too small where the pain's not big enough. But as long as the pain's big enough, which is about $1 million gain, $1 million net proceeds, then it's a very high close ratio. But we're not going to put a barrier to have to hire us to pay us something if you're not going to actually get the tax deferral, if that makes sense.
And I think part of the reason why we're essentially willing to work for free, which very few people in today's world do, is that Brett had mentioned, I mean, we have a very high conversion ratio. We're also very good in the very beginning of helping people understand when this is not right for them. So we're not necessarily wasting our time, because almost everybody that we go through the process of educating them and help them understand this, we've eliminated everyone who's not eligible, of course. And anybody that we get that far, it's almost a for sure thing that they're going to use the deferred sales trust. And we're just waiting on the sales date to happen, which is something out of our control. We've waited on the sales date for up to 2 years with some clients, right, Brett?
Exactly. Yeah. No. There's deals. I'm working on a deal right now. It's 13 years in the making, $7.7 million exit. And they're looking at the 1031 exchange versus the deferred sales trust, and I think it's like perfect for them. She's in her 80s. The husband has passed away. This is like all of their net worth, and we don't want to over concentrate, overpay for a property, and take on too much debt. And so it's like it's a beautiful thing. We'll see. They still want me to look for a property because that's how they made their money for the last 30 years, right? And this is someone I know for about 15 years. But some of these deals take a very long time. And at the end of the day, people have their wealth advisors that have helped them build their wealth over the years. And the biggest challenge for people is, well, why didn't they know about this, right? But even if they had known about it, if they haven't used it and actually closed the transactions, you can understand why they could be cautious or skeptical, because they don't want something to happen to all of the wealth that they helped you build. And so that's why, by the way, we invite all of those who are skeptics and to come with us. Real estate professionals, CPAs, tax professionals, luxury realtors, commercial real estate experts, crypto experts, to come on in to learn and to join the community in the fight for learning about what this powerful strategy can do for everybody. That's also, by the way, we're coming out with the book, Jake, right? So Jake's going to be in the book. He's like chapter 3 or so. Before his chapter, though, we do have Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank, which is pretty cool. But it's all about building a tax deferred exit strategy. And it's my story on like basically how I came to know about this, how I was just an average guy who was working in real estate. I didn't study to become a CPA or a tax professional, learned about this through the fire of the 2008 crash and wanting to provide transformation for clients, wanting to provide relief from feeling trapped by the 1031 exchange and losing, some lost half or everything within a 3-year period of time. And so I tell that story and so much more, and you can learn how to build a tax deferred exit strategy using the deferred sales trust. Check this out on Amazon, coming to you very soon. That being said, Jake, any questions from any of the audience as well?
There are a couple more.
Okay.
This has to do with the trustee,
Sure.
And maybe I can answer some of these, maybe you want to answer some of these, but who can be a trustee and what qualifies as at arm's length?
Yeah, good question. So, by the way, I didn't ask to be a trustee either. Part of my story, which is in the book, is I learned about the deferred sales trust as a real estate professional, or as a multifamily broker at Marcus and Millichap. And I just started to get to know the tax attorneys and spend time with them and really kind of watch them do their surgeries in the sense, right? Put people back together in the sense of their tax flow plans and their exiting of real estate. And I would just send referrals and I would just listen and become really just kind of curious and fascinated about the whole structure. And it wasn't until about 6 years into it, they said, hey, would you, or even more than that, would you like to become a trustee? And I said, tell me more. And they said, well, this just about better than anybody else. You've had the 10,000 hours essentially with us, and you can educate and coach other people. I grew up playing basketball and sports and stuff. I love working on teams and coaching and training other people. But to answer your specific question, it needs to be by kind of like certification or invite from those who created it, because it's a special structure. And if you don't have that expertise or that background, they're not going to just let anyone and everyone be a trustee. And the reason is because should the actual strategy be abused or used in an inappropriate way, it could collapse it all for everybody else. And so they have a perfect legal track record, 26 years, thousands of closes, billions under management, and it's never ever lost. There's just a few trustees that are out there. So technically anyone could become a trustee, but the question is whether or not they being the people who created the deferred sales trust tax attorney would approve it. Hopefully that answers the question, Jake.
I think it does. There's a little bit of exclusivity, and that's because this is a different type of trust. It's a business trust. You do kind of have to be approved by the attorneys. You cannot be the trustee of your own trust. Just a few things that are incredibly important to maintain the integrity of the trust itself. Can't be a person who is deemed that the client or the grantor of the property, etc., has any power, leverage, or control or influence over, so that the IRS doesn't unravel the whole deferral strategy.
Yep, very well said. Exactly right.
All right. Now there's one or two other things here. The seller of the asset, would the seller of the asset need to be listed in the PSA? Sorry, would the seller of the asset need to be listed in the PSA instead of the? Is the trust listed or is the seller of the asset listed? Can you maybe touch on, hey, I'm going to sell my house or my domain or whatever it is, and the process, like the day of or the day before, how that, should we actually exercise the option to use the trust, how that works, Brett?
Yeah, so it all depends on the deal, right? This is the other thing too. It's not a cookie cutter strategy, right? There's 5,000 qualified intermediaries out there that basically do this exact same thing. And it's just, maybe 10,000 IRA companies that do the same exact thing. The deferred sales trust is a dynamic business trust that takes an ongoing maintenance and management with the trustee, right, and the note holder and the financial advisor, all working and with the tax attorney as a team to make sure that this is a business trust, like it's a corporation, right? It's like that it's ongoing. So it's not just the setup one time or, hey, I can reverse engineer and just do it myself and save money. It's literally the professionals to execute the business plan and the trust itself. And so what that means is every deal is different, right? And as every deal is different, we want to look at that, assess that, go through that, and then line it up. And so, I mean, there's, for example, just did a deal in San Diego. It was a four partner sale. One client decided not to use the deferred sales trust. The other three decided to use the deferred sales trust. We had to have 3 separate deferred sales trusts. The entity they were selling was an S corp. Sometimes when they're selling, there's a C corp. Sometimes they're selling as an individual name. Like, there's all these different things. But the practical manner is, has the buyer removed all contingencies? If the answer is yes, and it's not an investment real estate deal, it's too late. Okay. If the answer is no, then we can form a deferred sales trust and we can assign your interest. Your interest might be an LLC, might be an S corp, might be a C corp, and the details of that, the tax attorneys, I call them the brain surgeons, they're the ones doing that work. So we're not the tax attorneys, we're not the CPAs. Everything is precise and it's not a one size fits all. So we would encourage you, if you have a live deal, to bring it to us, sign our conditional engagement agreements, let us go through it, let us see if we can still have time to set it up and to execute it. And by the way, you also want to work with escrow companies that know what they're doing, qualified intermediaries that know what they're doing. Because guess what? Not all 1031 companies want you to know about this. Not all escrow companies know what they're doing on this. So we've had escrows that said, oh yeah, we can do all this. We know what we're doing. We're the best of the escrows. And I said, okay. And we got down to the 12th hour, the day before closing. And all of a sudden they go, oh no, our legal team doesn't know about this. And they're going to say no to it. And we've had to transfer the escrow to our escrow companies to close the deal. Okay. So there's a number of moving parts. And again, back to this Rubik's Cube. It's not just a one turn and you're set. Your cube could be all kinds of different ways. And we've got to line it up properly and execute it perfectly by making sure you're working with the pros and you're not kind of doing it on your own. If that makes sense, Jake?
It does. I think that's very helpful.
Cool. All right. Good questions. Excellent questions. It's like walking into a knee surgeon. You're like, hey, so can I do this ACL surgery? You're like, well, I got my ACLs done on 2. I played basketball in college and I blew both of them out. And I remember walking into the doctor's office and I was saying, hey, how many of these you done? And he's like, thousands. I'm like, oh, wow. And how many have you done with? And he's like, well, I've done it for like a Chris Webber. I'm like, oh, okay. It's like, if it's good enough for Chris Webber, right? It's good enough for me. And it's sure enough, we did that. And the question was, should we use a cadaver? Should we use the hamstring? Should we cut out the hamstring? Should we use, what was the other method at that point? Something else. There's a third one, but we ended up doing the hamstring. And they had like a technique where they went in less invasively than just cutting out the entire knee, and had less swelling, more ways to do that. So that's the other thing too. As you're working with those that are, the 10,000 hours and are constantly doing this, we're constantly evolving to make it even better and better. And same thing with the tax attorneys. This is why you want to work with somebody that has the legal track record of the DST tax attorneys, our business partners that we work with, because they have a perfect legal track record. And there's some copycats out there, but that's why you want to be careful that you're working with somebody that has survived the fire of the IRS, that has had their actual clients gone through these and they've actually defended them. And it's been a perfect good outcome for all of the clients so far. Batting 1,000 with the DST. Super important that you're working in good hands, because you don't want to mess this up. Because what, Jake, if you're selling your $100 million company and there's $40 million on the line and estate tax for years, you can't afford to try something new, right? So what do you think about that, Jake?
Literally, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want a brand new knee surgeon or ACL surgeon working on me, so to speak. So absolutely, definitely, just as we would take care of our own body and our own health, we should be equally as worried about our own wealth and how we properly manage that.
I love that. That's great. Equally important as our own wealth. Okay, great. How about other questions? Anyone you can unmute yourself too, by the way. We're happy to answer those. And any live deals, those are cool too. We can talk about a live deal right now. And if you want to get started on your deferred sales trust, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. If you want to connect with Jake Miller, you can go to strategictaxsolutions.com. And we would love the opportunity to speak with you on your scenario and get to know you a little bit better offline as well. But if you want to open it up to the mastermind group here, you can also unmute yourself, or it could be for a friend, or it could be for a client, right? That's cool. And it could be a general discussion. So does anyone else have any other questions or thoughts right now?
Yeah, Brett, I have one.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was talking to my cousin the other day, who is a orthodontist, and him and his partner are starting to liquidate their practice. And partner they ended up selling, I think they have 4 of them. They ended up selling 2 of them and tried to use a structure similar to the deferred sales trust, but they're not in our system. And I'm pretty sure I would have seen them if they were in our thing. However, they said that they couldn't close the deal because of some sort of of the way that the offices were structured or something like that. I mean, are there any structures or anything like that that will hinder the ability to close or to utilize a DST?
So the answer is we haven't seen them yet, right? So there are the 2 things that kind of killed the deferred sales trust deals, though, however, that are kind of out of our control is either the time is squeezed down so much that the buyer has removed all contingencies, and or the entities that are helping to close the deals, the M&A advisors, the business brokers, the escrow, the attorneys on the other side, it's so foreign to them, or they don't want anything that's new on the outside to influence how they're going to get paid, right? And there's an example of that. Just lost a deal, and the clients were begging to try to get this thing in, and unfortunately they contacted us in the 12th hour, and we did everything we could to educate and go through it. And the buyers just, were ready to close, and they just said, we're not comfortable. And it's just their feeling, right? And we didn't get a specific answer of this is why we can't do it. And we're like, hey, the buyers will sign everything that you want them to sign, and they'll in fact, it should be a positive for the buyer, because if you think about it, if you're selling a $10 million business and you're going to defer, let's say in California, of a zero basis, 40% in tax, that's $4 million. As a buyer, would it be better if you as the seller have to pay that $4 million of tax, or if you could defer that, and just in case something that you're representing is not, accurate, that you have the ability to, make that whole? The answer is very clear. You'd rather have you be worth 10 million, right? Or at least have 10 million access to pay me on something that you didn't properly represent. So if you think of it like that, you're like, oh yeah, you're right. There should be no reason that a buyer would say no. So, now there's been orthodontists, there's been veterinarians, there's been optometrists, there's been cryptocurrency, there's been stock, there's been real estate, everything you could think of, right? That's been done over all of the years. And so what I would encourage or challenge those folks is to say, hey, would you like to speak with those who have done this already? Right? Would you like to speak with the tax attorneys and to show you how we can structure it? Hey, why don't you, before you sign this new purchase and sale agreement or asset purchase agreement, why don't you send it over for us to look at, and we can modify and adjust it? Part of the brilliance of the creator of the Deferred Sales Trust is he worked for Arthur Anderson, and he was a mergers and acquisitions attorney, and he did some of the biggest international deals in the world at that point. And then he's also a CPA and a tax attorney. We call him the Elon Musk of everything. He's the reason we're here. And we're going, if he can figure it out, and oftentimes he can, then great. If he can't, he'll tell you he can't, right? But so far he's never said he can't do it. Does that make sense, Pierce?
Yeah, it does. So there's nothing that we've seen, because my initial hunch was that you went to the wrong people. Someone who's doing something that's not what we're doing. We're doing something that's different.
Yeah, it's always a people person problem. It's never, and so at the end of the day, even if it doesn't work, they'll tell you. I just have, in all of my years since 2009 of working with the DST tax attorneys, there's never been a situation where they said, yeah, we can't do it unless it was the buyer has removed all contingencies, and
Right.
it's the funds are already sitting in your personal account. We can always do it. The question is, you're right, the other people on that side, did they know what they're doing, right?
Right.
And are they just like, oh, we ran out of time and we just got to push this thing forward? So this is part of why we have, we're connected, you, me, and Pierce and Jake now, 80,000 commercial and residential agents across the country. And then all the escrow companies, the qualified intermediaries, national law firms. We have those people, right? And the question is, are your people that are helping you, do they have access to the strategies that we have? And invite them in. Again, that's why we worked at no cost, no obligation. We'll try to break it down for them. So does that answer the question, Pierce?
Yeah, and I think, just to add to that, I think it just kind of goes to show the power of it, because they lost out on millions of dollars that they now have to pay in tax, because they went to the wrong people, and I tried to tell them, I was like, guys, like you got to play with the stars. Like, what do you like? You're playing in the minors, bro. Like, get up to the majors where things happen. So, yeah, I think it just really speaks to the power of the team and working with the professionals who actually can pull these things off.
Yep, there it is. That's great, Pierce. Thank you for sharing that. What else do we have? Any other questions from anyone else on the topic of the deferred sales trust? We are here.
We have a fiscal question.
Okay.
Fiscal question that has come in. The individual is asking, how does this look on somebody's personal financial statement? So let's say that there has been a sale and the property, it leaves your estate, so to speak, and it goes into this business trust. But what stays in your estate, Brett?
The promissory note, right? And so what you're trading, remember, is you're trading your ownership hat in exchange for a promissory note. You are becoming the lender or the bank, right? And so some of the wealthiest people in the world are bankers, right? They help to lend, they lend money to make money, right? So that's the key. This is part of why, by the way, if you're wondering, can I get the stepped up basis and get it outside my taxable estate? The answer is no. You can have one or the other, but you can't have both. So part of the 1031 blockbuster mentality was, hey, swap until you drop and get the stepped up basis so that you could be tax free or your kids can walk away with no tax. Well, it's true for capital gains tax, but it has nothing to do with estate tax. Okay. So very important to know which tax flow, cash flow, problem you have and what solution actually solves it. And remember that a stepped up basis is not the end all be all. And by the way, those exemptions are set to cut in half in 2025 from about 24 million married to about 12 million married, right? And so as your wealth is growing, you got to know those numbers so that you can use the appropriate strategy to help you to create and preserve more wealth and help the next generation to do the same. And so that's really important. So as far as the balance sheet is concerned, it's a promissory note, right? And basically it's showing that this trust owes me this $5 or $10 million at this interest rate, and the cash flow is coming into my bank account to help you qualify for loans. And that's really important. So hopefully that answers the question, Jake.
It does. And I think I will just add a little bit to it. So essentially, there's the same value on your personal financial statement, your balance sheet, what have you, right? It's just a different asset. Instead of whatever it is that you sold, it's a promissory note. Now, forward thinking, that is actually very beneficial for the entire estate tax and the death tax and everything else, right? Because we are essentially freezing today's value of what's in your estate. We're freezing it at that value because once it moves over into the deferred sales trust, again, we're going to reinvest it. We're also reinvesting the dollars you would have otherwise had to have paid in taxes. Now, reinvesting it, obviously, rule of 72, everything else, it's going to grow and it might double. And over time, it might triple. I mean, it's going to be bigger. And we've still frozen what's in your estate with the promissory notes. And so we've effectively sheltered that growth from being subject to your estate tax because of that original transfer of asset for promissory note that we did at the time of the transaction.
Yeah, and it's actually, and I want to add a little nuance there. It's actually even better than that, right? So not only is it frozen on the growth, but it's elimination on the exit. So I'll give you an actual deal that closed for a client of mine out of Colorado. They were selling a $5 million multifamily property, and there were 25 million, and they're around 60 years old. And all 25 million was inside their taxable estate. So that's the first question to ask is how much of your net worth is inside your taxable estate? And for them, all 25 million was. And so this opportunity upon the exit of the $5 million asset, we moved it outside of their taxable estate. And it has to happen at the close. It's not something you can just transfer, like transferring to a living trust. You got to have a legitimate third-party buyer who's paying fair market value and you're exiting, right? So we've got to do it right at the close, and we're going to change the characteristic of what's happening. And what happens, the outcome was all 5 million's outside the taxable estate. So now their taxable estate is only 20 million, right? And right now, if they were to pass away in this year, then they would have no estate tax, right? But that other 5 million is now growing. Not only is that 5 million eliminated 2 million or so, 40% of 5 million is about 2 million outside the taxable estate. eliminate it. But all the growth of that 5 million goes to 20 million over the next 20 years. It's outside the taxable estate. And so their goal and the plan is to systematically exit all of the 20 that's still inside the taxable estate. And so at the end of, let's say in 20 years we do that, not only are their taxable estate zero, but all of the growth of that 25 million, let's say it's worth 50, that just eliminated a huge amount of estate tax. That makes sense, Jake?
That is fantastic. Now, again, for like, if I want to go get a loan, my personal financial sheet, yeah, this just shows up as a promissory note, and the other thing might be growing substantially. And to some banker, they might say, well, your asset that's grown really big doesn't show up on your PFS anymore, just this promissory note. But as you had mentioned, just very briefly, maybe you can touch on a little bit more with some of what we've done with our other clients, there's income that's coming from this deferred sales trust that oftentimes, I would say in almost every scenario, provides what is necessary for the lenders to help them get a loan because of the cash flow.
Yeah, 100%. Also, too, the other thing is, remember when you're exiting, we're also we call the Dave Ramsey debt-free plan, because you're getting out of your debt, right? You're able to pay off your debt, which should also increase the strength of your balance sheet for the lender because you don't have as much debt, right? It's a debt income ratio, and then it's a DCR ratio for the asset that you're purchasing. So overall, we found that it's not a hindrance for people. It's actually a benefit. Banks like to see there's liquidity. Banks like to see that you're getting cash flow from different assets, and banks like to see lower debt. They're more willing to loan you more debt. And so, yeah, these are all good points that you're bringing up, Jake.
Very good. You know, that's actually the last of my questions that I'm getting over here on this side of things.
Excellent. I think we had another one of like, what are the fees? And so good question. We'll cover what's the cost of all this. So we'll cover some basic fees, and then we'll also cover a little bit of how to make the deferred sales trust an investment and not an expense. Okay. So the fees are basically, it'll take $1 million deal to keep it really simple. On the gross sales price of $1 million, the tax attorneys, our business partners, charge 1.5%. or $15,000. Now, what does that cover? Lifetime audit defense, okay, and all of the legal structure, all of the planning, all of the creation of the trust, talking with your CPA to make sure you're properly reporting it. But the most important thing is lifetime audit defense, state or federal. One of the biggest audits was in California, $125 million deal. Perfect, no change audit. All of that's really, really, really good. Okay, so that's the first set of fees. The second set of fees are for Jake and I, and we're somewhere around 1.5% to 2%, just depending on the AUM and or the net proceeds that go into the trust. So let's just use $1 million goes into the trust. Okay, let's say it's about $20,000 per year. $20,000 per year. Now let's compare that to like a corporate trustee and maybe just a on the street financial advisor. The corporate trustees could be as much as 1 to 1.5, and another financial advisor could be 1.5 to 2. So we try to get institutional rates and combine the expertise of myself with commercial real estate and being a trustee, and Jake's as a financial advisor and entrepreneur and everything that he's done. And we try to combine that to squeeze it to about 2% on average per year. No matter how and where you invest the funds. So whether that be into like real estate or back into the stock market or into hard money lending or just cryptocurrency, it's about that amount. Now the goal is to net typically 8%. It could be 7 or 6 or 5 based upon your risk tolerance, net of Jake and I's fee. So our goal would say on 8 would be to earn about 10 per year to net you about 8. Not a guarantee, not a promise. Now there's some miscellaneous fees like tax return and accounting fees, but net of those fees, we're trying to net you 8. So hopefully that makes sense on the fees for a full free schedule based upon your deal. You can email me, Brett@capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, and or connect with Jake at strategictaxsolutions.com. All right, what else? Anyone else have questions? We're Deferred Sales Trust made simple every Friday, 10 a.m. PST. By the way, this is a good time to let everybody know we're having a live in-person event. It's called the Meta Crypto Next Gen Real Estate Meetup, and it's happening in Berkeley, California on August the 2nd at 6 p.m., and you're invited. If you're a business professional, if you're a client, if you're just a person who's curious about real estate and cryptocurrency and building wealth and how the future of that's going to connect, and especially in changing times, we have some amazing panelists that I'll be interviewing. a top mortgage professional, insurance professional, top luxury realtor, commercial real estate broker, and we're also bringing a cryptocurrency expert to speak on all things crypto. So you don't want to miss that. That's August the 2nd, 6 p.m. in Berkeley, California. It's in-person event, the Meta Crypto Next Gen Real Estate Meetup. That being said, anyone else have any questions or thoughts at this point? If not, we're good, because I think we're up against the hour, 10 minutes to go. Hey, I want to thank you everyone for being here. Jake, if people want to get connected with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Give us a call, 1-800-773-1848, toll free. Also visit us at the website, strategictaxsolutions.com. We have links there for booking a time, as well as links to Brett's page, which is...
which my page is capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Again, that's where the book's going to be coming out as well. You're going to be able to see it there. And you can start your deferred sales trust. Mr. Pierce York, if people want to get in touch with you, Newport Luxury Real Estate and commercial real estate down there in the Los Angeles area, Pierce, what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, you can get me at kingdomluxuryrealty.com or my personal cell, which is 916-878-0903. You can shoot me a text or give me a call.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Please rate, review, subscribe if you're listening to this on any of the podcasts or the YouTube channel. And remember, not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is an amazing way for you to create and preserve more wealth or help your clients, friends, and family do the same. We